Hey guys, sorry about the delay. My computer was having some internet network connection issues. Of course, this kind of thing happens right before, a live event. And oh wow, the Q&A app is not apparently working on my end at the moment. I promised that I tested these things beforehand, and well, yeah, it's having some issues. Ah, there it goes. So there is a Q&A area somewhere on your screen. I cannot see what the reader or viewer screen looks like, but if you want to pop questions in there, you can do so, and then you'll be able to have questions at some point during this. So there's also a chat area, but I have not had it working for me. If you chat there, it may or may not show up. To those of you who are watching, if you're on Twitter, you can tweet the hashtag Raven Oak Live, and I'll check that on my other screen. In that way, if you ask me something there, I can also see it. Or if you need to chat that I'm not loud enough, or whatever you need to say, I can see it there. You on the bottom of that screen as well. So lots of options. All right, so it is 6:06 my time, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of get the ball rolling here. If you're not too familiar with me, my name is Raven Oak, and I'm a science fiction and fantasy author living in Seattle. And I hang for my debut fantasy, Amaskan's Blood, and it was in Seattle, and a lot of people couldn't make it, so people were asking me to do a live event so that they could participate, and that's what this event is. So something to start off with, because I am going to read from this, is that I guess it was the week of the book signing, so almost a month ago now, Amaskan's Blood hit the fantasy bestseller list on Amazon, which is awesome because most books that are small press or independent press don't necessarily list bestsellers very easily or well because they don't have the big publishers behind them, and so they're not able to spend millions of dollars promoting me because, hey, I'm not Stephen King. Imagine that. So a lot of those types of books don't necessarily rank, and I'm incredibly happy that it made the bestseller list. And uh, hopefully my connection's coming through okay. Like I said, I was having some network issues, so if it's not, somebody let me know, but otherwise I'm going to assume that everything is well. All right, so the scene that I'm actually going to read from Amaskan's Blood is probably my most personal book, just because when I was thinking about how I wanted to write a story about two characters switching places and learning from each other, I knew that I wanted someone who is an assassin who learns from a princess, and a princess who learns from an assassin, just because those are not typically things you see. You don't normally hear about somebody who's considered a ruthless killer learning anything from a stuck-up princess. So that was something I kind of wanted to explore. And as I was writing it, the main character was really struggling with what family means, and she was struggling with whether or not she could be a part of two families, whether or not this adoptive family that she had and her original family could both mean something to her. And that was actually something that was popping up in my own world that I hadn't even thought about until I was writing. That, my mother came back into my world, and it was this family that I didn't ask for, and it was a family that I really hadn't had my whole life. So I wasn't sure what to do with it. And as I was figuring out my own answers to those questions, Adelaide in Amaskan's Blood was also figuring out those same answers and questions. And so she went through quite an emotional upheaval in the book, as I did. And it made things more personal as I was writing it. It allowed me to identify with my character in a way that I had not really found in previous books that I've written. So we have a journey of hers where she's going through and trying to save the world from all of the conflict that's going on in the book. You have The Trebor, which are a different type of assassin, where she is more on a holy quest thinking that she's doing God's work. They just want to kill everybody. She's also trying to save both of her families from this hidden evil that doesn't really know what to do with her because she's supposed to be on their side, so to speak. And as she's going through that, we also see points of view from her birth family. And the scene that I'm going to read is one of those scenes that is from that point of view. So we're actually seeing King Leon getting some information he didn't expect to get. All right. The sleeping woman in his arms shifted, her heel connecting with his shin. The jagged scar to the right of her eye bunched together with worry lines. One of her hands flitted to the scar tissue along her throat, and she whimpered in rhythm to the twitching of the facial muscles around her eyes. Shh, King Leon murmured, running his thumb down her jawline. Through the deep blue bed curtains, tiny hints of light streamed in from one of 4 windows, which left most of the room dark in the early dawn. Even with the lack of light, the scar running parallel to her jaw stood out in contrast to the others along her body. The puffy and angry line stretched the full width of her neck from ear to ear. 10 years together, and still she never spoke of it, never talked of the wound that walked in and out of her nightmares. She thought she'd kept her past from him, but a few paid informants gained a king whatever information he wished. That, and the fact that she talked in her sleep. A smile lifted the corners of his thin lips as he stared at the woman wrapped beneath the heavy winter blankets. He had never set out to find someone else after Catherine, but Ida, she was everything Catherine was not. Strength to a flaw, impertinence in her honesty, and a passion that burned long after the sunset. His thumb froze at the shift in her breathing, and he peered down to find blue eyes staring up at him. Instead of their usual humor, the deep blue pools were haunted by shadows, and the smile fell from his lips. Your sleep was troubled, he whispered. She sat up, pulling the blanket with her. Her shoulder twitched, and he reached out a wrinkled hand to touch it before he leaned forward where he could see her face. When a few tears decorated her cheeks, his hands tightened on her shoulders. What is it, Ida? What's bothering you so? Was it something in Sedai? I begged you not to send me. The scar across her throat jumped when she spoke, and her voice resembled gravel. Since when has my sapier been afraid of anything? The former captain of the Royal Guard didn't answer as another tear slid down a cheek, more gaunt than it had been a few months before. Has it only been 4 months since I sent her to her homeland? There was more bone beneath his fingers than he was accustomed to. Ida, love, I know you hate Sedai, but we all must make sacrifices for duty. Her body stilled while long pale fingers gripped the bed sheets. You know nothing. Leon didn't know what shocked him more, that she was angry with him or that she was afraid. I know the healers in Sedai saved you. He ignored her gasp and continued, and that you fled your homeland for Alexander. But you worked your way to the top of my army because you were fearless. Unlike now. Instead of pushing further, he waited and wrapped the blankets around them both as his arms encircled her waist. She gave in to her emotions, and Leon bit the inside of his cheek. In 10 years as his mistress, he hadn't once seen her lose her composure, much less cry, and her weakness left knots in his gut. 'Twas a mistake to return to Sedai, she whispered. I sent a woman I trust into that country, a tenacious spy who feared nothing, and she's returned to me broken. I was going to wait until the sun rose before asking for your report, but considering your tears, I have to ask, what happened? What brought you back early and afraid? Ida rose from the bed, her bare feet picking their way across clothing strewn haphazardly on the floor from a few hours before she'd returned. or before when she'd returned, sorry. Near midnight, she'd crept into his chambers, her return from Sedai just shy of a week early. The look on her face had led him to ask no questions, but as she stood in the sprinkling of sunlight the morning brought, dread seeped into Leon's bones. Her 50 years did little to mar her body, but a decade of leading battles had left scars aplenty across her frame, and Leon frowned to see a fresh mark across her thigh, its scab already sloughing off and healing. "I've failed you, Your Majesty." Her shoulders slumped forward before she faced him. "Were you not successful, then, in finding the location of the Order of Amaskan?" Her lips trembled. I was successful, Your Majesty." King Leon sucked air through clenched teeth much too fast, and the ever-present congestion in his lungs leapt forth. Another coughing spasm whipped through him. Stars danced before his eyes, and Ida's footsteps sounded nearby. Shortly after, she pressed the mug into his waiting hands. Some of the medicine sloshed out of the cup before it found his lips, and several swallows later, the spasm passed, leaving hope in its wake. "Where's the order located?" "Sire, there's more." "Where are they?" "They're near the coast, near the town of Haif." He was 2 feet out of bed and halfway to the door before he remembered the need for clothing, and despite his bruised lungs, he quickly dug through his clothes chest. Leon seized the first clothes his fingers touched, an old pair of breeches a touch too loose at the waist, and an undershirt that bore a hole from a moth. He didn't care what he looked like. After 30 years, he had finally found the men who had massacred his family. His giddy footsteps carried him across the room where he rang for a page. When the boy appeared, his face flushed at the sight of Ida's nudity as she stood near the window. Leon grabbed the boy's sleeve, pulling his attention into line. "I need Captain Fenton brought to my sitting room immediately." When the door shut behind the young page, Ida wrapped a robe around her and knelt before Leon, who gestured for her to rise. He haphazardly dug through a box of letters. "Once Michael arrives, you'll tell us both about their location. We have plans to make." "There's more, and you must hear it alone." When he faced her again, she still knelt on the stone floor, and her shoulder-length hair spilled limply across her face. "What more is there? After 13 years, I finally have the location of the bastards. Today's a good day, Ida. Today I'll have my revenge." "Will you march across Sedai's borders to take it?" "If necessary. You'd bring the wrath of the Boheme Senate down upon us. Would you rip this land apart again for another pointless war?" King Leon took her hands into his own as he knelt down beside her. "I thought you would understand this. Those bastards killed my wife, my daughter. What else would you have me do? The Boheme Senate has done nothing to stop the Amaskans. If they won't seek justice, then I will." The knock at the door interrupted them, and as Leon rose from his knees, Ida seized the edge of his shirt. "You think you've the whole of it, but you must hear me out. Please, send the good captain away till you've heard the truth." King Leon sighed, and when the page knocked on the door a second time, he opened it a crack. "Tell Captain Fenton I'll be with him shortly." "Speak. Tell me what has kept you tossing in your sleep." At first she didn't make a sound, choosing instead to stare at the carved pieces of wood inlaid in stone across his bedchamber floor, and he ground his teeth at silence. When his lips smacked open, she said, "I never intended to hurt you. Know that I'd no idea what they'd planned, I swear to you. But I found in Sedai, your daughter's alive. Ileana's alive." This time, when the air left him, he worried it would not return, as his lungs froze in place. He sputtered twice before his vocal cords worked again. "You speak madness. She died by Amaskan hands." "I believed it too, Your Majesty. But I swear to you that I saw your daughter alive. And well. You sent me home to find those responsible for her death, but she's alive and traipsing through the capital city of Aruna. It's her. I'd swear my life on it." Leon gripped the handle of the door as he squeezed his eyes shut. I sent her away for protection, and the Amaskans killed her outside the city walls. That's what Joffrin told me. Bastard's a traitor. King Leon heaved her to her feet by her bare shoulders. Rough hands tilted her face to look at his, but even then her eyes veered sideways as she refused to meet his gaze. You speak in riddles. You tell me my daughter's alive. You tell me you have the location of my enemies, and that my most trusted advisor is a traitor. You will explain yourself and how you know this to be true. Joffrin's my uncle. It was sent here to get close to your father, to gain the royal family's trust, and then to give evidence to interested parties of your family's coup to overthrow the Boheme Senate. As the words spilled from her mouth, he could feel the wrinkles in his brow multiply. Don't do that, Papa. The wrinkle monster will get you. Hearing Ileana's 5-year-old voice in his mind left him weak, and he stepped sideways as his balance wavered. 3 steps found him alongside the bed he'd shared with Ida minutes before, and he reached out to one of 4 bedposts. His aim was true, but he stubbed his big toe on the chest at the foot of the bed. Leon cursed under his breath. Ida massaged her throat as she spoke. I grew up in a family that told me things that'd make it easy for me to believe that my own actions were just and true. When the Little War of 3 began, it was the perfect opportunity. Uncle Joffrin and my brother sent 3 of us here to Alesta. King Leon dropped the letter in his hand. Our task was simple. While the king was busy with the enemy at his border, we'd take the child Uncle Joffrin arranged for us to protect. No. The single word sent her blue eyes to drown in unshed tears. I swear to you, Leon, I didn't know what they planned. No one said they were to kill her. I thought... You thought what exactly? You would kidnap my children and wife? My family? To do what exactly? Go for a walk in the woods? Who the hell are you to take part in such a... The tears fled their prison and leapt across her cheeks. That's what you are. You're a Amaskan, he whispered. She winced when his fingers squeezed what little flesh clung to her bones, but she didn't look away. The quiet anger within left him breathless, yet he lifted her off her feet before he flung her to the floor with a snarl. Who are you? What are you to crawl into my bed, into my heart? For 10 years. The knock at the door startled them both. Your Majesty? Send the captain away, she hissed from where she'd fallen, her robe torn where she'd tripped over it. Why should I do anything you ask? Because I'm the only one who knows where your daughter is. He stared at the stranger before him, the jaguar who had slipped into his castle, only to shred him with jagged claws as it toyed with his life. I'll send him away, but only so he doesn't see the mess I've made when I'm done with you. Her tears only made it worse. If she had acted like a cold-blooded killer, it would have been easier to kill her. Damn her. The wooden door shook as Michael resumed pounding on it. King Leon opened it just enough to poke his balding head outside. Your Majesty, are you well? I heard shouting. I'm fine. Give us a moment. Captain Fenton frowned, but nodded once before Leon shut the door. You have my attention for 5 minutes. Use it well, Ida. And leave nothing out. Be truthful if you're capable. Ida nodded before wiping a few tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. Before I was captain of your guard, I was a Amaskan. My brother's Malachi Abner, though few know his birth name as he hides in shadows under many names and many labels. One you may know as Eli Breddick. Leon clenched his jaw against the words he would speak. She's brother to the Amaskan leader. She may have just bought herself more time. Her hand moved along her scar, and when she realized the action, Ida clenched her hand into a fist. Joffrin had a deal with my brother, though not the deal you think. His job was to convince you that sending away your family was the best way to keep them safe. Shadians paid the Amaskans to wipe out your line, and once you'd sent your family outside the walls, they were marked as kill on sight. She swallowed hard. I swear I didn't know what my brother planned, that he ordered Ileana killed, not till we'd already seized her and crossed into Sedai. He knew I'd have trouble with killing a child. We all should have. That isn't justice, and it isn't what we... Ida swallowed hard and closed her eyes a moment before continuing. When the others told me what my coward brother couldn't, that we were to kill a child, I refused. The others attacked me. They said I was a traitor to justice. Did you kill them? Yes, though I had little choice if either of us was to live. And when I returned to my brother with your daughter alive, he punished me for my failure to complete the job. He slit your throat. Yes, and he took pleasure in the act. No one leaves the Amaskans, not alive anyway. He grabbed your daughter and tossed me dying in the woods. My own brother abandoned me. And the last thing I saw was his blade to Ileana's throat. I don't know how the healers found me, or how they managed to heal such a wound, but I knew I couldn't return home. I swear to you, when I set out for Alexander, I didn't come here with the intent to betray you, Leon. Then what was your purpose? He could feel the vein in his temple pulse as his eyes drifted to the four-poster bed in the corner. The sheets were still a jumble of blue fabric, and bile threatened to choke him at the rush of memories that flooded to the forefront of his mind. She continued talking, her shoulders forward toward her knees. All I could think about was how my brother killed a child. I fled here to try and make things right, to make up for my role in this. I didn't know I would fall in love with you. Despite the quaking in his belly, he held himself still as his fingers tried to carve half-moons into the wood of the bedpost. Get up, he ordered, and she flinched before rising on trembling legs. How is Ileana alive? I don't know. Leon slapped her with the back of his hand, and his left ring left a bleeding scratch across her proud cheekbone. Your Majesty, I swear to you, your oaths mean nothing to me. You betrayed this kingdom. You betrayed me. Get dressed. Leon couldn't risk looking at her, couldn't risk seeing her clothe herself, an action he'd indulged in many mornings over the past decade. He forced his eyes to look upon her shadow as she gathered her clothing from the floor. It wasn't as simple as his love for her. His body knew what was before him and urged him forward, but his mind knew better. She was a Amaskan, the deadliest of killers. One moment out of his sight, and she couldn't kill him, or she could kill him before he'd even done more than blink. While parts of him danced as he listened to her clothing brush against supple skin, others winced at the thought of her blade in his guts. He caught a glimpse of bare shoulders as she pulled on an undershirt. Shoulders I kissed in the darkness of night. He halted with the biting of his tongue. His stomach roiled at the thought of touching her now, and her shadow moved to pull leather boots over her feet. Ida Warhammer knelt before him for a second time. Why did you return? You had to know that doing so would mean your death. I couldn't let you continue to think on her as dead. When I saw her in the Capitol, wearing the Order's garb, I nearly ran my horse to ground to return. Wait, back up, he said, as he waved a hand at her. Why was my daughter wearing the garb of the Order? His Sepir's mouth twisted, and she tilted her head back to expose her scar to the light that streamed through the window. If you wish to finish... She didn't answer his question, nor did she have to. His daughter was a Amaskan. For a moment he was sorely tempted, but here at last was the brave woman he loved, awaiting her death by his hand. With legs almost too shaky to bear his weight, he stumbled over to where she knelt and touched the scar along her throat. He couldn't forgive her, not yet, if ever, but use her he would. Does anyone at the Order know you were in Sedai? He asked. Ida opened her eyes in confusion. I'm not sure. It's possible I was spotted, though I don't think they knew who I was. Why? I have one last job for you. You would trust me enough to... Leon shook his head. No, trust doesn't even begin to enter this picture. Now listen and listen well, Ida, if that's even your name. You're going to return to Sedai for me. He waited a moment for comprehension to sink in, and when it did, her reaction was everything he hoped it would be. He laughed as her eyes sought an escape, an honest laugh that shook him from the belly up, and he retrieved her sword from the chest beside him. When he handed it to her, she fumbled the blade. Please, kill me if that's what you wish, but don't ask me to go before my brother again. King Leon pressed a finger to her lips. You will go to Sedai and not return until you have my daughter with you. You will return her to me, and if you fail me in this, the Boheme Senate will be the least of your worries, as I will hunt you down like the traitor you are. Don't fail me. My brother won't release her. She's his best Amaskan. Inside his chest, a piece of his heart wilted, and he struggled to remain standing as another coughing fit brewed. Do whatever it takes. She handed him another glass of the healer's brew. I'm sorry, Leon, she whispered, before disappearing through his bedroom door. Outside, Michael cleared his throat, but King Leon ignored him as his bravado shriveled up and died. His daughter was alive. The mug in his hand shook and sloshed liquid across his knees. He had no knowledge of when he'd found his seat, but he rested on the chest at the foot of his bed, which still smelled of soaps Ida used. Fingers curled around the mug's handle before he sent it skittering across the floor, the remaining tea leaving a trail across the rug. Your Majesty? His ears heard the words, but his brain ignored them. My Ileana, now alive, and now a killer. When the shakes began this time, he didn't stop them. He couldn't. Alrighty, so that is a scene that gives a little bit of background into King Leon and Ida and his daughter as well, and how she in some way becomes Amaskan and sets up the scene for the majority of the book, and her trying to save everybody as well as balance a lot of internal conflict. So one of the things that reviewers have commented on is the character development being very rich and the world building being just like I said, it was Martin, and to compare me to George R. R. Martin a little bit. So that book is available Amazon, Barnes and Noble, IndieBound, Books a Million, Powell's. I mean, any bookstore you can get it in paperback or in ebook form. And I will say though that on Amazon the ebook's currently on sale, so that's kind of a nice little perk for you. All right, so I am going to read another selection before I do the Q&A, but I just kind of want to make sure that everything is going well on your end. It looks like it. I don't see anything going on chaotic with comments. I'm going to look really quick and refresh Twitter just to make sure everything is good on that end. And it looks to be, yep, okay. So, oh, and I think YouTube just did something really bizarre and is now saying, oh, nope, it's going, but it looks like it's lost video. Hopefully it hasn't lost video. There it goes. Okay. So that may have just been a connection issue on my end. We'll hope that it's not. This is Class M Exile, which is the next thing coming out. It's a short novella. So it's, 102 pages versus Amaskan's Blood's 470. So it's not quite a doorstop. It's science fiction space opera. And I wrote it, well, I started it at the Locust Writers Workshop with Connie Willis and Chris Barzak. And we were learning how to take events from our life that affected us and change those into something that we could use as a plot line. So I was thinking about middle school, and shout out to Christina Current Fidalgo and Melissa Lampkin, because they'll know what I'm talking about. But we went to middle school in College Station, Texas, which, yes, while it has Texas A&M, it's still Texas. And Texas is really the antithesis of Seattle and most of the things to the north. So there's a lot of bullying and there's a lot of Republican, traditional, conservative type beliefs. And I remember when a friend was a new student, and she was so different from everybody else at that school because she drove up with her mother and they had dogs and cats in the car. And that was the first time I'd ever seen anybody arrive to school with cats in the car. But that's what they did. And she had like hemp bracelets and braids in her hair and was wearing a shirt that said, "A woman without a man is like a fish without a bicycle," which was incredibly feminist and was just completely different from anything I'd ever seen. She had pentacles and all kinds of, different symbols on that don't bother me now, but at the time, everybody else kind of freaked out. It was almost like a mix between people trying to stampede away and people glaring and bad mouthing and, oh, we need to get on to her because that's not going to happen in this town. I remember how I really wanted to be friends with her immediately because she was just so different. And she was the one who introduced me to science fiction and fantasy, so I owe her a lot. So this whole moment, this whole scene of how people were reacting really made an impact on me just because I'd never seen people react so horribly to somebody before like that. It just baffled me. So I was looking at that, and then I wrote a scene at the workshop, and then we took that scene and we were supposed to rewrite it as something science fiction or fantasy. And I reimagined it with Earl, and he has a really thick Texas accent, which I will attempt to do, but I do not really have a Texas accent, so it may or may not work. But he is landing in Bazar as a tourist, and something happens, and it's that same kind of stampede reaction, that gut reaction people have when they see somebody who's so incredibly different and they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do with this information, and so they panic. And that's something that's happening a lot in this country with transgender people, and the impressions and the encounters that they experience when people don't know a lot about them and make gut assumptions and then panic. So it's something that, it's something topical that tied in really well when I was writing it and just worked. And so I'm going to read a little bit from that, from the very beginning chapter. And I'm going to take a moment and take a sip of Dr. Pepper because my throat is killing me. Which I blame Maya and Janine for, because Thursday we spent all day talking about panels for conferences, and my throat just went all chaotic with all the talking. So I blame them. All right, so this first chapter is called A Fish Without a Bicycle. Imagine that. All right. Bazar, Class M planet in the middle of nowhere. Dust, dust, and more dust. Unless you circle round to the more habitable region, you'd be stuck without a ship to anywhere. Round the corner, though, you could find everything from ship parts and dried food packs to roast dog and the rare bicycle. Hell, you could even buy yourself a genuine religion if you were so inclined. I wasn't sure why I'd come here. Touristing weren't my thing. Only that I'd never been to Bazar, and everyone said you have to visit at least once. It wasn't the humidity that left my noses crinkling in the bright sun, but the smell of manure and too many beings as hundreds of heads bobbed up and down in a sea of booths, goods, and tourists. The ultimate tourist trap, and here I'd taken the bait. Sweat pooled inside my heavy ship boots. Other tourists from a ship bumped my elbows as they disembarked the marzipan. Don't ask. The captain has weird taste in food, or so I heard. This little squirt elbowed his way past me, and half a dozen folks crowded round a blazing red booth promising trinkets made of genuine gold, fresh from the mines of Merle. I cringed when he hollered, about his silly ideas for using dead folks for energy. I weren't but 3 steps away from this fool when a white-hooded figure shoved its way through the crowd. She skidded to a stop just inside my personal space. "Ever been to Bazar?" she asked, with a quick glance over her shoulder. 2 beefy men carrying scowls were coming in fast enough to knock over a stand of leafy green somethings. Girl leaned close to me like we was kin, and my frame hid her as them military beefcakes passed. Every race, religion, creed, gender, species, and nationality in over 100 worlds traveled through Bazar, or so I heard, but never before had I seen her kind outside a book. Hell, I ain't think they even existed no more. The departing shuttle sent a cloud of dust skittering across us, and her hood fell back. Whispers moved across the market like rain, first as tiny droplets, mostly ignored till the downpour caught everyone off guard. Then all motion stopped. The market's clattering and clanking and chattering died as all focus shifted to her. One of them fancy gentlemen tumbled over a child in his attempt to flee. Some 3-eyed creature let loose a half cough, half scream as it raced up the ramp of the marzipan. "What?" I asked. "She's just a human." "But look at her. She's only got 2 eyes," a voice cried out. "Yeah, and 2 legs. Who uses 2 legs anymore?" The cries from them tourists continued, but the female human stood there in cargo pants and a T-shirt that read, "A woman without a man is like a fish without a bicycle." To them she was the plague. She was a one-way trip into the flames of a dying sun. And she was awesome. I didn't know what a fish was, and I'd never seen a real bicycle, but by golly, I was gonna find out. The name's Earl. Somewhere in all my reading, I recalled something about hands being important to humans. I held a slightly damp hand palm up in front of her face. When she exposed 2 rows of lightly yellow teeth, someone behind us growled as they passed. But she kept on a smiling and flashing those weapons like they were nothing at all. "Mel." She seized my hand and pumped it up and down. "You've never been to Bazar?" I shook my head. "Nope, first time. You?" "I live here, sort of." Another growl as a Rustian passed. His tentacled eyes darted back and forth. Round us, tourists settled back into their haggling over knickknacks and Patty Macks, whatever they were. I ain't saying folks huddled near or nothing. In fact, a nice empty circle settled round us. "I ain't never heard of humans living here. Once upon a time, maybe, but—" Her laugh cut like them hydraulics on the marzipan when they went belly up, but I pretended not to notice. "Where do you think that phrase came from?" she asked, and I shrugged. More laughter from her sent a whiff of moldy breath my way. With breath like that, no wonder them folks were scared. But I reckoned it were more'n that. A quick look-see showed her body to be little more than bones and whipcord. She went on like she never noticed my frown. "From humans. More than half of your common vocabulary came from Earth. Hell, your accent would put you right at home in the southern United States." "More words I ain't never heard. What were states, and how'd they get all united? I mean, there was a war going on. As far as I knew, Earth was dead, long destroyed by them damn radar. Nothing more'n bottom feeders from radar with enough firepower to blow up a sun and then some." When she said home, I lost what little there was to my river of thought. "But I figure it's out there somewhere." "What is?" I asked. Her smile sort of fell gentle-like. Poor girl weren't nothing but a young'un standing 2-footed on the dirt of Bazar. Poor and alone. My heart sank. "My home, Earth," she said. and fingered the stone slung around her neck with a fraying rope. "That's it!" The shout from behind weren't nothing compared to the shove that came next as a beefy, red-skinned man with a taser grabbed her t-shirt. "You aren't welcome here. You've been told that before, human. Now get gone." He glared and twirled the taser by the wrist strap with one finger. "But she lives here," I muttered, and the muscles of his forearms thickened, and that's forearms, not, yeah. Before I had a chance of finding out exactly what that meant, a deep rumble set the booths to trembling, and the market's chatter returned to silence. Mel's blue eyes widened, and she whispered, "Oh, damn." She didn't laugh no more, didn't smile neither, just stood transfixed. Mel stared at the sky like the heavens were falling, even when the red-skinned enforcer jabbed her shoulder with his meaty fingers. I followed her gaze, as did the rest of them folks in the market, and when the shadow fell across us, blotting out the sun, even the enforcer fell silent. It was big. Well, big don't do it justice, but I'm a sympatersic. Words weren't ever my strength. Damned Rydarl's ship blackened that sky and then groaned under the weight of its own size. I ain't never seen a ship like that. The marzipan could have fit in that ship's pocket, and you would have never seen it in all the coils and loops and doodads hanging from the engines of that behemoth. If you have ever seen a herd of cattle escaping a cyber lion, you've seen Bazar in that moment, feet kicking up dust as people ran in every direction, though none of them was the right one. Didn't matter if they went left or right, that ship was everywhere. Mel trembled beside me. Those eyes, only two of them. Yet I'd swear she'd seen more than me when she done looked at the underbelly of that ship. One moment she was still, the next she gave me a shove that done sent me out of the street and behind some flimsy curtain. I had just enough time to recognize it as a street vendor's booth before Mel barreled in. "Keep moving," she shouted. I didn't know where we was going, but I reckoned I didn't need to. The screams and groans outside hurt my ears, and Mel gave my hand a desperate tug. The young'un led me through a maze of booths and back alleys that smelled of piss and shit. So strong was the smell, bile rose in my throat. That ship landed somewhere behind us and silence descended. We must have run circles, 'cause I saw the marzipan as we ducked behind an empty wooden crate. Several smaller ships burned. Something struck the marzipan with a muffled thud, and the shields held. I'll admit, I didn't do much thinking. My brain spun around in all that chaos while bodies dropped to the dust below. As Mel tried to catch her wind, I hauled her over to the marzipan and pushed her through an open hatch. "What are you doing?" she hissed, but I shushed her. No need to call attention to her or nothing. I tossed her jacket's hood over her head to cover them dark brown curls and placed a finger to her lips. "Don't say nothing." The hatch closed behind us, cutting off the sun. All them practice drills paid off as I pulled Mel toward the cargo hold's front. Slightly muted sobs dead ahead corrected my path when I turned wrong, and soon after, the beam from a flashlight hit my front eyes. The light shifted to Mel's hood-covered face before it clicked off, straining us in darkness. "Why are the lights out?" someone whispered. "The shields are taking too much power, I suppose." The speaker was hushed by one of them marzipan guards who asked, "Everyone here?" "Everyone except Real. He's dead." I didn't know which one of the passengers said it. Didn't rightly recall Real either. Guess it didn't matter no more. When a crew member ordered us strapped into the racks, I took care of Mel. Weren't no reason to alert anyone. Not yet, anyway. She stayed quiet-like as she leaned against the cushioned wall rack. When the belt clicked across her scraggly frame and locked her into place, I seen the fear in her eyes just the once before she blinked it away. Sharpness stared back as I belted myself in. She took hold of my hand and squeezed. The marzipan's thrusters sent a vibration through my feet. We were leaving Bazar. If we were lucky, we'd make it off-world alive. And if we were luckier, no one would notice the Hugh man stole away. All right, so that's Class M Exile, or at least the first chapter of it. And it's interesting because my husband could always tell when I was editing that one, because I would get on Skype and then I would proceed to sound like a hick. And or if I picked up the phone, I would do the same thing, because Earl's accent would just stay with me and it wouldn't let go sometimes. And trust me, I didn't want to keep any version of a Texas accent in my head for very long if I could help it. So that's Class M, and this is the cover. It's on my website in a much bigger version that you can see, but it is available. The ebook version of it is available for pre-order already on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Apple, Kobo, like you name it. It's going to be out June, I want to say 22nd. I think that's the day. And then just like Amaskan's Blood, it'll be available at bookstores everywhere worldwide. So that's kind of cool. And right now, as far as what I'm working on, because I think this was a question somebody asked and sent in, was what are you working on? I've got 2 short stories that are going to be in a speculative fiction / mystery cross-genre anthology. And so those stories will be in that, and that comes out in December. Editing right now. Silent Frontier is another space opera of mine that was scheduled for initially September. Around the time that the book signing happened, I broke my wrist, and my wrist is doing much better now. But at the time, I was supposed to be doing edits, and so that's been delayed. I will let people know when that has a more solid release date. But for right now, it's been delayed. All right, so we've got a little bit of time left, and I can do some Q&A. I need to see if anybody has put any questions actually in the Q&A queue for me, or on Twitter. We will see. Da, 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 da. Okay. Yep. Questions. Okay. Not seeing anything on the Google Hangout, which is nice. Okay, so questions. Haha. I do have a couple. So, Matt asked how the particular stories came to me, which I sort of answered with Class M, but I didn't necessarily answer with Amaskan's Blood. Stories come to me a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's I'm driving and an idea just pops into my head, and then I use my little voice recorder to write down what's in my head and elaborate on it later. A lot of times stories come to me in dreams. Some people dream things and then they write down and they wake up, and they read what they wrote down in the middle of the night and go, oh God, this is horrible. Why did I think that was a good idea? That usually is not the case with me. Oddly enough, I have dreamed entire novels where I wake up and I have pages of dialogue and I'm scribbling as fast as I can, or I'm recording myself talking. So I can get an entire plot line from beginning to end in a dream, and then I just have to write it, which is the hard work. So that's often how ideas come to me. Amaskan's Blood was one of those where I dreamed about, again, that idea of 2 characters switching places. And I knew I wanted to do something with an assassin who wasn't, or who was a badass, but wasn't necessarily evil, but was still kind of an unreliable narrator, a little bit of a moral ambiguity going on. I wanted to play with that a little bit. I really like assassins when they're done that way, and they're done well, and you see a lot of character development, and you find out that they're human like the rest of us, that they have weaknesses, that they cry, that they're human. And I wanted to play with that. So that's kind of where that idea came from. The idea for Silent Frontier is a little trickier. Um, Gosh, that one I wrote a long, long time ago, and then I pulled it out and dusted it off, and really liked that where it was going. I kind of wanted that one to be a space opera that threw back to roots of space opera without the sexism. So, and I'll talk more on that one when I do an event later, closer to when that comes out. Kat, haha, hi Kat. She's asking, do I write in chronological order from the first chapter to the end, or do I write specific scenes and then build around them? Yes and no. It's story. Class M, I wrote chronological order from first to end. Being shorter, that was just kind of how that went. Amaskan's Blood was different. I wrote most of it in chronological order, and then this is one of the things a lot of writers do. You know, I'd be writing and writing and writing, and I'd get to a scene and I'd be like, oh, I need to research this sword fighter. I need to research, does this exist in this time period that, their technological culture is based on? So I'll do the, okay, stop, insert scene here after I've researched it, and I put it in brackets so that when I'm going back and revising and editing, I search for all those places where I've had brackets, and then I fill in as I need to. So sometimes those scenes ended up having to be put in later. Some parts of Amaskan's Blood were also scenes that, again, because that was one that did come to me in a dream, scenes I'd fleshed out from the dream notes. So some of those, I like to call them candy bar scenes. I think a couple of different authors call them those. They're the scenes we really like, the ones we really want to write. And so those tend to be sometimes the scenes that we write first, because they're more entertaining, or they're dealing with topics we really want to write about right now. For example, as I was finishing Amaskan's Blood, I really, really, really wanted to go work on certain scenes from a secret project that's kind of not so secret. Ida Warhammer, the character we saw in the scene that I read from Amaskan's Blood. She's getting her own book, and you're going to learn more about the scar across her throat and more about her brother's betrayal of her and how she was a Amaskan and all that comes with that. So she's getting her own book, and I really, really wanted to be working on that at times instead of working on the editing of Amaskan's Blood. So sometimes that's kind of a pain in the butt because I want to be doing one thing and I'm doing the other. So thank you for that question. That's actually a really good question. I think Matt also had another question. He said, what was the scene you kept thinking about? I guess is what he asked. The scene where Adelaide meets King Leon for the first time. I really had that in my head, just sitting there constantly, and it wouldn't let go until I wrote it. So that would be one scene. Melissa has a question. She says, why did you decide to go to the small press independent publishing route? I think that's a really good way to have gone. Question. The big, we call them the big five. They're the big traditional publishers. And that's because when we talk about, like, in science fiction fantasy, Del Rey is a small publishing brand underneath one of the big five publishing houses. So there's a Random House, and I'm totally blanking on these words at the moment. But you have the big five publishers, and they basically own all of the publishing houses. And getting in with them, it's like winning the lottery, because they probably, I think the last quote I heard, they said they get something like 10,000 books a day. I mean, that many sent to them. So getting noticed by them is impossible. And when you get noticed by them and you get an actual publishing contract for something like the big five publishers, you're looking at royalties. If you're Stephen King, it's different. But if you're everybody else, it's like 7-8%. So you're looking at a very, very tiny amount. And even though they do some average, a lot of the work that you see authors doing where they're on social media and they're constantly talking about their books and they're constantly trying to get reviewers to review their books, which I know Melissa's sister talked about in a blog post of hers recently. When that kind of stuff's going on, that's actually stuff that the author has to do, even with a big company, a big traditional publisher. So if I'm going to be doing most of the work, why not go with a smaller publisher or somebody who, is going to give better royalties? If you go independent publishing or you go small press, all of those different contracts and all of the different royalty breakdowns for those, you get much bigger royalties. I mean, you're talking 30, 40% and more, and you have more control because it's a smaller publisher or an independent route. You can do things like, no, I don't like that cover and I really want you to change it. And they will go, oh, okay, well, let's talk about it. Or you have a little more say in some of the editing process, or you have more say in what social media you do and what. Ah, are we back? Yay! Sorry. I have no idea if YouTube's going to catch up, though. It's kind of doing its thing of error. Well, we will find out. If YouTube cut out, then I'm sorry, guys. The video should fix itself, hopefully momentarily. No, if you didn't hear earlier this week, my laptop died momentarily, and my MacBook is about 7 years old, so it's having some trouble. And because it's having trouble, it's having network trouble and has been this afternoon, even though we tested it all afternoon and everything was fine, and then it decided to be cantankerous. So my apologies that it cut out. And I'm being told from Glenn on Google Hangouts that it's back up, so that's good. My apologies that cut out. This is technology. I know the Double Clicks did their March concert recently, and Google Plus just completely went down on them, and so they were on YouTube only. So it happens. I love this format, but sometimes it's kind of a pain in the butt, and that's kind of what happens. So I answered Melissa's question. I'm done answering that question, I think. And I answered Kat's question. Sorry, I'm going down the checklist now that I'm actually back up. It is 7:08, so we're actually coming up on when we're supposed to be stopping, I guess, technically. But I wanted to give everybody else a chance to ask questions if they have them. I see, Glenn's little chat thing over there, so I know you guys can ask them. And I'm hoping YouTube's behaving. I don't know. I don't see it behaving, but we shall see. All right, so last chance for questions, or forever hold your peace. Not forever, but I'll give you a moment if you have any. I hope I answered anything that people wanted asked. Oh, there we go. There's one. Oh, okay. Favorite characters. Yeah. The characters that I'm really happy about are the ones that I have. So, I'm really happy about writing Ida's story. I'm happy about Adelaide's story and Amaskan's Blood. I love Earl and Mel in Class M. I don't know. I mean, if I don't like a character, then they don't show up. So that's kind of how I answer that question. Somebody's asking how they get into the Hangout. That's actually a really good question. I'm not sure. I think if you go to the event page, there's a link over on the details area where you can go to the event page. I thought that there was a way from there to join the Hangout. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure if that answered your question, Glenn. But I do know that on the video screen, there should also be the Q&A area. And that's another way you can ask questions. So I'm not seeing anybody actually like scrolling like live chat or anything like that. Because I don't think Google really does that. Or maybe they do and I just don't know how to do it. We'll find out. But that's kind of where that's at. All right. Well, folks, this has been a learning experience for all of us. Yay. Um, I've talked about what's coming out, what's coming up, and given you some samples of some stuff. If you haven't bought the books, you should. If you haven't reviewed the books and you've read them, please review them. Melissa asked that wonderful question about small press and independent press. I will tell you that the best thing that you can do for us is give us reviews, because, even if you buy somebody like, Patrick Rothfuss, who is well known, or somebody else's book, review them. That's how people hear about books, is reviews and word of mouth. Books aren't really sold these days as much in bookstores. We've seen the decline of bookstore sales. People go online to buy things. And what they do, they pull up the reviews, or they hear, oh, my mom said this book's a good book. So reviews are really crucial to us in any, level of writerdom. So if you read it and you like it, please review it. And if you're a really, really super awesome person, you'll cross post your reviews. That means that you kind of copy and paste it on Goodreads and Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and, wherever you can throw it, just because, again, it gives people an idea of why somebody liked it and what they thought about it. So that's what you can do for me. And what I'll do for you is continue to write awesome stuff. And, I will do these things again. I like this Google Hangout thing, hopefully with a better internet connection, because I'll be getting a new laptop soon. And I'll share some more stuff and samples with you, because this is kind of a cool format and I really like doing it. So hope you had a good evening. And if you're watching this non-live, I hope you enjoyed it. And I will go through and edit the YouTube video a little bit better, so that it's not quite so butchered when my connection dropped. Anyway, have a good evening. Bye, folks. As soon as I find my mouse, anyway.